Okay, it is 2:05, so we're going to get things rolling. To those of you just joining us, thank you so much for being here. My name is Lauren Hedges, and I will be your facilitator for the fourth Tech Talk series in the DWBIA free web series. So today we have got professional graphic designer Amanda joining us. She will be showing you how to create your own impactful visuals to elevate your business's social media presence, advertising, and more. Having said that, I'm going to pass everything over to her now, but I will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if you guys have anything that you need to share, please feel free to do so there, and enjoy Amanda's presentation.
Thank you, Lauren, for the introduction and for facilitating. And I just want to say thank you as well to the Downtown Windsor BIA for asking me to come speak with you all today. Can everyone hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
I can hear you great, Amanda.
Perfect. Okay. So as Lauren said, my name's Amanda, and I've been working as a graphic designer for the past 5 years. And a lot of that I learned in school, but also a lot of the things I picked up were just from working. So graphic design isn't something that you're going to pick up and instantly be good at it. There's a learning curve to it, but I think that today we're going to cover a lot of information that's going to be enough to get you started on your journey at least. So I'm not going to keep my camera on the whole time, but I did want to just pop in and say hi and put a face to the voice. I'm going to be mostly doing screen sharing with you. We're going to start with a slideshow, and then I'm also going to finish off with a tutorial at the end. So there we go. So before we begin, I just want to clarify that this webinar isn't intended to devalue or replace the need for professional graphic designers. Working as a graphic designer myself, that's definitely not something that I would ever want to do. The intention here is more to give small business owners the tools to be able to take control of their everyday design needs, such as your social media visuals. Many small businesses, they don't have a ton of money to allocate to graphic design. That's just a fact, but by taking on smaller design tasks yourself, you'll be able to stretch that design budget further and then put it to the best possible use where it's most important. And later on in the presentation, I'll also touch on situations in which I think you absolutely should be hiring a professional. So in order to fit as much information as possible today into the next 40 minutes or so, I'm also going to be sharing plenty of resources and further learning. So you can look into that if that's something that you're interested in as well. And my slides will be available for you to keep and reference after the presentation. I'll figure out a way to do that, whether that's by email or whatever. We'll figure that out. So the topics we're going to cover today is starting with choosing your design software, and we'll move on to where to find stock images, how to select and pair fonts, the visual hierarchy of text, how to create balance in your designs, and how to include your overall branding in your designs, when to hire a designer, and then we'll do some basic editing and designing in Photoshop as well at the end. So before you can start designing, you have to make a decision about what design software you're actually going to be using. So I'm going to run through some of the options with you that are available at a variety of different price points and skill levels so that you'll be able to decide what will best meet your needs. So we'll start kind of fancy and work our way down from there. The big three that I use every day are Adobe Illustrator, Photoshop, and InDesign. So if you're going to commit to just using one design program, I would recommend Photoshop would be your best bet because it's a very comprehensive program, so it'll allow you to do pretty much everything that you need. You'll be able to do your image editing and designing all in that one program instead of having to flip-flop between different ones. So Photoshop is a very large and complex program, but don't let it intimidate you because we are going to learn some useful functions later that are just going to get you started. And if you are interested in Photoshop, you can get a 7-day free trial just to see how you like it first. And then after that, the least expensive option is the Adobe CC photographer package. And you'll see the details there on your screen. So this package includes Photoshop, Lightroom, which is another photo editing program, 20 gigs of cloud storage, Adobe Fonts, which is also a really useful resource because it has a ton of high quality fonts that you can download and they'll automatically go into your design programs. And they're all, if you have access to that, they're all free to use. You can use them for whatever you want. So this package is $9.99 US a month. So that's the least expensive Photoshop package. And if you see at the bottom there is a link where you can browse all the different Adobe Creative Cloud plans that you can get. So the next option that I'm going to show you is another relatively inexpensive option for Photoshop. It's the Adobe Photoshop CC single app plan. So this includes Photoshop and it includes Adobe Spark, which is an in-browser social graphics editor. So you would use that to create graphics for social media. It's template-based. It's really easy to use. So we're going to touch on that a little bit more later on. This package also includes Fresco, which is a digital painting app, and Portfolio, which is a website builder I've never used, but it seems very interesting. So if you need a website, that might also be a good idea for you to look into. This package includes 100 gigs of cloud storage, again, Adobe Fonts, and your pricing for this package is going to be dependent on how you choose to pay. So if you pay monthly, it's less commitment, but it's going to end up costing you more money in the long haul. And if you pay the year up front, the total is going to be less. The next program we're going to touch on is Adobe Spark. So Adobe Spark is really simple to use, like I said, and it's template based. You can browse through a huge library of templates and choose one that suits what you're going for with your design. And this is ideal for quick, easy social media visuals. It's somewhat limiting in what you can do creatively. I'd never used it before. So before this presentation, I kind of tried to play around with it. And because I'm used to being able to do more, it was a little bit frustrating for me, but I can see the ease of use is there. So if you're not super comfortable with computers or design programs, this might be a good happy medium for you. You can try the starter plan for free, or if you're interested, you can also pay $9.99 US a month for the Adobe Spark single app plan, which also gives you access to Adobe fonts and the first 2 months are free. And Adobe Spark website also has a lot of really great simple design inspiration for you to take a look at if you're feeling a little creatively blocked. And then they also have a blog that provides tips and resources for design, digital marketing, and more, which might also be useful to you. So if these Adobe products sound too expensive or complicated for you, you want to start with something easier, there are a number of apps that you can get on your phone or in browser that will help you to create simple yet elevated visuals very quickly. The first one I'll talk about is called a design kit. So this is actually one that I use myself. I keep it on my phone for quick on-the-go graphics, and I use it to create a lot of Instagram stories that stand out a little bit more than what you're just able to do in Instagram. And I find a design kit is more flexible than a lot of the other DIY options. So this one is free, but any add-ons that you're interested in, like if you want to add extra fonts, if you want to add extra brushes, those are going to be usually about $3 for a pack. And then some others that are free that you could use are Canva, Stencil, Easel, and Crello. Those are all pretty well renowned as far as free graphic design apps go. Those are the big ones that a lot of people use. So if you do choose to go in this direction, my advice for you is to just try to keep it really simple and do your best to stay on brand. Try to choose the templates that are going to make sense with your overall branding. And I also recommend reading that blog post that I've linked at the bottom of the slide, because the author gives thorough advice on how and when to best utilize these free tools. So now that you know some of the options that are available, how do you know which one to choose? There are some questions on the screen that you can ask yourself to help you decide. First of all, what fits your budget? And what are your actual design needs? How much creative freedom do you really need within the program that you're using? How comfortable are you with technology and with design software? And how much time do you have to commit to learning a new program? If you don't have a lot of spare time to commit to learning, or you aren't all that tech savvy, Photoshop might not be your best bet. But the best way to figure out which of these works for you is just to try it out. Take advantage of some of those free trials I mentioned earlier. And this is a risk-free way to test your options and see what the best fit is for you and the needs of your business. Now that we know a little bit more about the design software that's available, we're going to get into the actual designing a little bit. So the first thing I want to talk about is stock images. Images are a simple way to enhance and impact your overall design, but photography is protected by copyright in Canada, so you can't just take any photo that you find off of Google and use it. You actually have to have the owner's permission to use that photo. So a workaround for this is to source your images from some royalty-free stock image sites. And stock images are a great resource, but you should choose wisely and try to avoid relying on them too heavily if possible. So here are some of the stock image sites that I recommend. All of them are free except for Adobe Stock. At the bottom there does require a subscription. However, a lot of those Adobe packages that I mentioned earlier do include 10 free Adobe stock images, and that's honestly probably the best available option to get stock images, but it is more expensive than the others. So I encourage you to incorporate your own images when you can, not just rely on stock images, because even if all you have is a phone with a decent camera, you can use that to your advantage and sort of incorporate more of your personality and your brand into your designs. That being said, make sure any images that you're using are clear and unpixelated, because a pixelated image will really ruin your design and make it look unprofessional. And you also want to avoid the cheesy, overdone stock images like the one pictured on the right, a very familiar image of a woman laughing at her salad. There's a lot of stock images out there that are just very overdone and cliche, and it's best to avoid ones like that. So if you want to check out this list later, for stock images, there's a lot of really beautiful options there. They're not really cheesy. They're not your everyday stock photos that you're used to seeing. They're actually very beautiful. So that's a really good tool that you can utilize. Now that we've covered imagery, the next thing we need to know how to do is make your typography make sense. So the first rule that I see all the time people breaking is don't use too many fonts. You want to use about 2 to 3 max, because any more than that can be really overwhelming to the viewer and confusing. And the overall effect ends up appearing a lot more thrown together. So it's best to stick to those 2 to 3. So pairing fonts can be a little bit tricky. You want 2 fonts that make sense together, that look good together. So you're going to aim for contrast, but also a similar mood. And for contrast, you can try pairing a thick font with a thin font, or a sans serif with a serif font. Generally, those kind of opposites look good together. And what I mean by mood is elegant, retro, modern. All the text that you're using within one design should sort of make sense and follow that same mood. And the mood of the text will also help you to establish the mood of your overall design. When in doubt with pairing fonts, you can always just use the same typeface but different weights. So if you want to do a bold title with a regular body copy, that will help you kind of establish that hierarchy without having to actually match fonts together. And if you're still struggling with font pairing, I've linked 3 resources at the bottom, some cheat sheets and some more tips that should get you on your way. Another thing you want to make sure is that your text is always clear and readable at a glance, because most people will skim when they're reading, especially if they're reading online. And if they can't absorb your message at a glance, they'll most likely just skip it. So you want to make sure your text is large enough to be read easily. And if your target audience is older, you'll probably want to go bigger than you think you need to, just to ensure that they can see that clearly too. And always check your spelling. Typos are easy to make, but they're also really easy to avoid. And spelling mistakes will immediately damage the credibility of your business, and they'll make you look unprofessional. So it can never hurt to just do a last-minute check. And as a funny aside, when I was creating my PowerPoints, I had a spelling error on this slide. Luckily, I did do that last-minute check and caught it, because that would have been really embarrassing. And finally, you're going to want to consider the visual hierarchy of your text. So this hierarchy will clearly communicate to your audience the order that you want them to read your information in. And the most important information should obviously stand out first. So generally, you'll have 3 levels of that importance. You'll have the headline, the subheading, and the body. So there are a variety of ways that you can establish this visual hierarchy, which will help the viewers to navigate your design. So the first way that I'm going to touch on is by using size and weight. This will help guide your viewer's eye. Larger text will be read first, and increasing the font size or weight will add importance to that text. So you've probably made a word bold in your email to add emphasis before, and the same idea applies here. You can also use pops of contrasting color to draw attention to elements or to separate different elements within your design. Case is another way you can establish hierarchy. So you know how when someone is typing in all caps and we tend to read it as if they're yelling? Well, this is something that we want to avoid. So uppercase headings are okay. That's an easy way to add more impact and get that attention that you're looking for. But you want to avoid writing all your copy in all caps, because it's very overwhelming and hard to read. And finally, the position of your text will also impact the order in which it's read. So centering your type within your design will help to make it stand out. So try a centered headline above a left justified subheading and body to get started. So here I'm just going to go through some examples of ways that text can be good or bad. So on the left, this font is nice, but it's hard to read. And that's the case with a lot of script fonts, is that they're not immediately easy to read. There is a place for them within design, but for our purposes, you're probably going to want to avoid anything that's not instantly going to be legible. So on the right, this font is simple and easier to read. Next, we have two examples, one where the text is hard to read because there's a lack of contrast between the font and the background image. A way to work around that is to add a slightly transparent callout box, and that will allow your text to pop a little bit more. So this is another thing to consider when designing and making sure that your font is actually readable. You really do need that contrast, because if it's too hard to read, people just won't bother. And here's an example of how powerful it can be when you develop that hierarchy of text. Because on the left, we have just a block of text, nothing stands out. Depending on where someone sees it, they might not read it at all. But on the right, we have that very easy to digest, visually pleasing design, and it's just really easy to navigate because it sort of leads your eye naturally. So those are some examples of how you can use text to your advantage and also to your disadvantage. Now I want to talk about an important principle in graphic design, which is balance. So you want to make sure that you're creating balance within everything that you design. So all objects in graphic design carry a visual weight, and size is a big contributor to their weight, but also color. Anything that makes them bigger, stand out more, contributes to that visual weight. So the weight of all the objects within your design should be balanced, and balance can be symmetrical or asymmetrical. With symmetrical balance, all the elements are distributed evenly, either vertically or horizontally, and this lends to a very neat, overall organized look for your design. So depending on the business you're designing for, this neat, symmetrical look might really fit in with your brand, and that might be a route you want to go. But if you're looking for something a little more fun and interesting, you will want to give asymmetrical balance a try, because this will really add interest and create a sense of movement within your design. It's a bit more difficult to achieve than symmetrical balance, and getting it right will take a bit of practice, but just eyeball it and do your best and keep working at it, and eventually you should be able to make it work. The next design principle I want to talk about is space. So you might be tempted to fill every bit of available space within your designs, and I'm sure you've all seen designs that do this as well. But it's actually better if you don't. So instead of crowding all the elements in your design, give them a little bit of room to breathe. Because overcrowding in design can look squished and uncomfortable, and it may even deter your audience from looking at it long enough to process your message. And you can see the example of how much more clean the design with white space looks rather than the jumbled mess beside it. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And white space also allows the eyes to rest and lets your message be absorbed more effectively. Space can also improve the overall legibility and help you, again, develop that hierarchy, resulting in designs that are easier to navigate. So try to be as mindful of the unoccupied space in your design as you are of the objects within your design to make sure that they all work together to make your designs overall more effective. So now that we understand how to design a little bit more effectively, we want to know how to incorporate our branding into designs. So if you have a strong visual brand identity already, that's awesome. You can incorporate that into your designs and it will help to make them instantly recognizable as yours. And consistency will make your brand more memorable and it'll help your audience, your customers, establish more of a connection with you. If you don't have a strong visual brand identity, we'll touch on that a bit more on the next slide, but for now, try to think about what personality traits your brand would have if it were a person. So if it's youthful and fun, your design should give off that same energy. But if your business is a little more subdued and sophisticated, you'll want to use font choices and layouts that reflect that. So some ways that you can inject your branding into your designs is through color. You can keep your color palette, patterns, and visual elements consistent across all of your designs. Utilize the fonts you've chosen for your brand. If possible, if you're using those free design apps I mentioned before, your font choices are going to be limited. So that may be another reason why you want to go with one of the Adobe products, because you'll actually, for the most part, be able to use your own branded fonts and it'll all make more sense. You want to maintain your brand voice. So make sure that any copy is written using your brand's unique voice. And again, with this, think about the personality that your brand would have, how that person would speak. And this is true of not just your design, but everything that you do, from your social media captions to if you send out a newsletter, everything should be written with that same voice. And then your logo. You can include your logo in your designs when it's needed and when it's appropriate. So when I'm designing materials for print, I almost always will include the logo. Social media is a little bit different. Some people like to include their logo across all of their social media graphics for that consistency. I don't feel like that's always necessary. If you plan on the post primarily being seen on your own business's social accounts, then people already know that that message is coming from you. You could probably go without the logo. But if you expect the post to be shared a lot by other people and businesses, it's worth including just to bring that context back. So do what feels right for your business and what you think makes the most sense for your intended audience. And then you may have other icons, patterns, or elements that are associated with your branding. So you can find creative ways to incorporate those into your design as well, just for added consistency. And I want to go through this link at the bottom with you, just for a look at all the different elements that come together to create the Starbucks brand that we're familiar with. So I think this is a really strong learning tool because it's so interactive. And also because it not only demonstrates all the elements that come together to make up a brand identity, but also here you can see it highlights the importance of how much of each element goes into the recipe. And you can see how each of these different pieces is unique in itself, but there's enough consistency that ties it all together. It's all recognizable as the same brand. So you can go through this later if you're interested. I think it's a neat little tool. And the next thing I want to talk about is, when should you hire a graphic designer? So even if you are working on a tight budget, there are times when it's beneficial to your business to spend extra money to hire a designer. And here are some of the examples when I think that will be really beneficial to you. So if you're branding or rebranding your business, a professional graphic designer is going to be able to make sure that everything from your website to your print materials looks consistent, cohesive, and professional. They're going to create something for you that you can use for years to come. And same thing with logo design. I know it's a touchy subject because it can be super expensive, but creating a really great logo requires talent, expertise, and it's really time consuming. So it's a worthwhile investment. And if you see the image I've included, demonstrates just the start of the logo design process. So it usually starts with around 50 or more sketches like this that are just logo ideas. And then from there, you'll narrow it down to maybe 10 or 15 logo concepts, and then develop those concepts further into 5 actual potential logos until you reach the one logo. So it's a really involved process, and it requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of skill, and it's best just to leave it to the professionals. Another thing that's worth the investment of hiring a professional is any storefront or permanent signage, because a designer is going to understand the necessary specifications to be able to create and prepare those large scale projects for print. And if you don't have that basis of knowledge, you might find it really frustrating. You might end up not getting what you hoped for or what you paid for. And then that same logic applies as well to any trade show and event displays. And if you do have that really professional looking, attractive trade show setup, that's going to help you to stand out as well in the big sea of booths. And even though it is a bit of an investment, your business is definitely worth it. It's something that you're going to use every day, that's going to be seen every day for years to come. So it's definitely worth, if you can swing it, to have a professional help you out with that. And then this last slide, I just included a few more resources that I think are really helpful, really interesting. Canva Design School has a ton of resources, tutorials, blog posts, tips, similar to what we've talked about here today. So if you're interested in learning more, that's something that could be helpful to you. Pix Imperfect is a really awesome YouTuber who, it's a little bit more in depth, but he does really great Photoshop tutorials. And I've learned quite a few things from those. They're pretty easy to follow. And then 99 Designs blog, again, more tutorials and resources for you for further learning. And finally, Made with Unsplash. Unsplash is one of the free stock photo websites that I mentioned before. And this is just a division of that website that showcases all the different things that people have then taken those photos and made really interesting designs out of. I just think it's fun to look at, good inspiration. And there's a lot on there, so you can check that out as well. if you're interested. So that's it for the slideshow portion of my presentation. If you have any questions for me, want to reach out, my email's at the bottom there. Please feel free to contact me. And now I'm going to do a little Photoshop tutorial. So for the sake of this exercise, we're going to pretend that I'm creating a social media graphic for a cafe to promote a new drink on the menu. So ideally, if this was your business, you'd have a photo of the actual drink, but I'm not really a cafe, so I'm gonna just go to Unsplash and find a stock photo instead. So let's say we're trying to make an ad for iced coffee. And I like the way that this one looks, so I'm just gonna hit download free. And I'll save that. So then I'm just gonna open it with Photoshop. So this is what Photoshop will probably look like for you. I haven't changed too much on mine, so these are pretty much the default settings. And you have your photo right here. But I kind of want it to be flipped the other way. So, oh, and you have all your toolbar right here. And if you hover over any of these tools, it'll tell you what they all do and give you a little demonstration video as well. So we're not going to use most of these, but just for your future learning, if you hover over them, it'll give you just a quick tip. So I want to flip this image. So I'm going to go to Image, Image Rotation, Flip Canvas Horizontal. And now it's flipped. And I think that I would like it a little bit brighter as well. So again, I'm going to go to Image and then down to Adjustments. And most of your photo editing, photo adjustments, lighting, everything is going to be under this Adjustments tab. So I'm just going to go to Brightness and Contrast. And I'm going to take it up by, let's say, 30. I like how that looks. And if you want to see before and after, you can just toggle and untoggle this preview. Maybe 20. It's a little bright. Okay. Now the next thing I want to do is crop this image. So I'm going to say that this graphic is intended for use on Instagram. So I'm going to make it a square. So in your toolbar right here, this is going to be your crop tool. So click on that. And it already has it set as a square. But if I didn't want a square, you have all these different ratios to choose from that are already set in there. Or if you want to do a freeform crop, you can just go to this width times height times resolution, and you'll be able to crop it however you want without restriction. But like I said, I want it to be a square, so I'm just going to do the square. And then you can move this around. You can use your arrow keys to move this around, or you can use your mouse. Get it how you like it. And I think that looks pretty good. So once you have it how you want it positioned, you can just go up here and hit this check mark, and your image will be cropped. Now let's say I didn't like how I cropped it. and I wanted to take it back how it was before, you would just go to Edit, Undo. So now I think everything I wanted to do to my image is done, and now I'm going to start adding the actual text. So your text tool is down here. Click on that. And then you can click and drag to create your text box wherever you want it. And you'll be able to move that around as well. If you want to move something, just go to the Move tool. Another thing I want to touch on, I don't want to talk about layers too much because it's kind of a confusing concept if you're new to graphic design, but you'll notice that when I added this text box, a new layer popped up. So if you think about your layers as a stack of papers, the paper that's on the top is going to be what shows. So if I shuffled this layer to be underneath my background, you wouldn't be able to see the text anymore. The text is still there, but it's behind the background layer. So every time you add text or an object, it'll usually automatically add a new layer. So I'm going to make this my headline. I'm going to say iced coffee because this isn't a copywriting presentation. It's just a graphic design presentation, so it doesn't have to be clever. And then here is where you're going to pick all your fonts. So you'll see I have some of these Typekit, the TK. Those are my Adobe fonts that I've downloaded. And then I have some others in here as well. So I think I want this Cubano to be my heading. So there's that. I'm going to keep it regular. And then right here where you see this 95, that's going to be the size of your text. So I'm going to increase that to about 250 because this is a really big image that I downloaded. So now we have this big headline ready to go. And I want to change the color. So one way you can do that is down here in the bottom corner, click on that little color swatch and your color picker will come up and you can kind of play with it until you find a color that you like. But I think I want to go with a nice orange color for this. Maybe not that bright. Something like that. So I'm happy with that. And then you can use your Move tool again to kind of arrange that to be where you want it. And I want it centered because we know that centered text is going to get the most attention first. Then I'm going to go to my text tool and I'm going to add another text box. And again, another layer pops up. And this one's going to say, try our new. But I want to make this text smaller, so I'm going to highlight it like that. Go up here and change it to 110. And then I'm going to change how that's justified. So right now it's center justified, and you can change that just by clicking between these options. Take my Move tool again, put it kind of where I want it. And then I want to change the color just to differentiate it a little bit from our headline. So I'm gonna go with maybe a brown. And I'm going to line that up with the headline. And then I want to add just another little bit of text down here for our body. And this one's going to say, buy one, get one free only on June 25th. And you can change the size of your text box. So if you want your text to extend wider, you can drag it out like that. I'm going to change this font because we already have a lot of this one going on. I'm going to look for something with a little less weight to it. So I'm going to pick this DIN alternate. And I'm going to take that down to about 95. Now I move that. Kind of play with your elements until you get them to a position that you like. Another handy tip that you should make sure you do, it'll just make your life a little bit easier when you're learning. Make sure that you have auto select layer on. That way you're going to be able to grab any of these elements that you want and move them. If you don't have that checked, then I have a bunch of layers selected. Okay, if you don't have that checked, then you're only going to be able to edit the layer that you actually have selected, and it just gets a little bit confusing. So if you have that on, you'll be able to move these elements around freely. Just gonna move that down a little bit. So I'm pretty happy with how that looks. I would post that on Instagram. So I'm ready to save it. And I go to File, Save. And then first I'm gonna save this as just a Photoshop document. If you are working on this for an extended period of time, I would definitely recommend that you save several times as you go. Just, you never know what could happen with technology. Your program could crash, and it's really unfortunate when you lose all the progress on something that you've worked on. So make sure that you're saving as a Photoshop file while you work. And then, so I'll just call this mixed copy. Save that. And then you also want to have it saved as a file that you can actually use on social media. So I'll go save. Oops, no, save as this time because I already saved it. And I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And if you were saving a document for print instead of social media, you would probably want to save it as a PDF. But because I said this was an Instagram graphic, I'm going to save it as a JPEG. And I'm going to make it high. I already said this was a really big photo, so it doesn't have to be maximum. I don't want this to be a huge, huge file. That's it. I'm done my design. So hopefully you learned a few things through this tutorial. There's so much more to learn in Photoshop. It's an absolutely huge program. This is just the very, very basics. But if you do choose to try out Photoshop, you can get a week free. So I highly encourage you to take advantage of that week-long trial and see if you can get the hang of it, play with it, hover over all the different tools, look through all the options available to you. Practice getting to know layers a little bit, because that's also a really important part of this program. But yeah, I hope this was a good little introduction to you and that you're ready to get started coming up with your own designs. So now I'm going to hand it back to Lauren and we can go to the Q&A portion.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. That was excellent. There was a lot of really good information in there, and we have had a couple of questions come through. So it's 2:55 right now. There is a chance we will go past 3 o'clock. Is that okay with you, Amanda?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Great. All right. So if there's anyone who is in attendance that cannot stay past 3 o'clock, just remember that we are recording this session and it will be available online for you to review later on. Amanda also mentioned earlier that she would like to share her slides with you all. So I will make sure that that gets out to you all. Amanda, you and I can have a chat about that when we're finished.
Perfect.
And we're taking care of that. So with that, on to the questions. The first one coming through is from Deidre, and the question is, what is the difference between Spark and Canva?
So Spark is an Adobe product. Ooh, I can hear my echo on your screen. That's weird. So Spark is an Adobe product. It's a little bit higher end than Canva. I haven't used either one all that much, to be honest, but my impression of Spark is that you're going to be able to save your images to a higher res. You're going to be able to do more with those. And I think Canva is more limited in terms of fonts you can use, as well as kind of branching out from that template.
Okay, great, very helpful, thank you. Our next question came in from Erica. Which would you say is the best app for including your own photography? I use Photofy and I like it, but find it is limiting for that.
I would probably say, again, a design kit. It's just my favorite. You are able to, if we're talking in terms of the free apps, that would be my recommendation. There's a lot that you're able to do with it. You'll be able to add your own photography. You'll be able to create photo frames for your images. So again, I don't have a ton of experience working with free apps just because I've always used Adobe, but that's one that I've tried that I actually keep coming back to use. So I would definitely recommend that.
Excellent, okay. One more from Deidre. Have you ever used GIMP? And if you have, do you have any resources to learn it?
I have used GIMP actually. I started designing on GIMP before I ever went to school, before I started working. I think I started using it actually when I was in high school, and I really just played around with it and picked it up from there. It's not the easiest way to learn, so I would say that probably you can find a lot of videos on YouTube. You can learn almost anything on YouTube. I think it's fairly similar to Photoshop in its functionality, but for those who don't know, GIMP is like a free design software. It's pretty powerful in terms of a free program. I would say just see what you can find on YouTube, honestly.
YouTube's always a good choice. I've learned so many things from there. Pretty much whatever you're looking to learn, YouTube is a good answer.
Really my go-to.
Do you have a specific YouTube channel or YouTuber that you like for Photoshop or other design tutorials?
There was the one that I mentioned before in my slides. I can't remember exactly what his YouTube handle is. I'll take a look. I'm subscribed to him. I'm not screen sharing anything. I think it was Pick Something. But he's my favorite design YouTuber that I follow. There's just so much content there that he shares, but it's a little bit more advanced, like I said.
Okay. So one more question in there from Pat. What are the best dimensions for creating a graphic for Facebook or Instagram? Square?
When I'm creating graphics that I'm specifically going to post on my Instagram feed, I usually go with square. You can do them a little bit wider or taller, but when it actually is being viewed in your, like on your profile, it's only going to show that square image. So I find it best to just stick with a square so that I know exactly what it's always going to look like. So I usually do 1080 by 1080 pixels for what I'm designing for Instagram. And then for Facebook, because when I'm designing social media graphics, I usually use the same design for Twitter and Facebook. So I use the dimensions that are best viewed in Twitter just because it's a little bit more strict than Facebook. So the ratio is, I think it's 9:16. I can get the exact dimensions that I use from what I have saved later and let you know, but I think it's a 9:16 ratio is what I use for Facebook and Twitter.
Excellent. All right. So Pat says this has been very helpful and a great resource to use as well. And thank you. Jennifer says Pix Imperfect. I believe that was the
one
we were looking for. Yes. Okay.
He's my fave.
Wonderful. I'll have to check him out. So do we have any last questions to get in for Amanda before she is gone? Going once. Going twice. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Amanda, for this wonderful presentation. It has been very informative. Thank you to everyone who participated in the Tech Talk series, whether this was your first, fourth, or anywhere in between. We do appreciate you coming out to these. Keep tuned to the DWBIA website, where all of the courses will be posted for you to review at some point. And we will be getting Amanda's slide deck out to you shortly. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy your afternoon and stay safe. And thanks again, Amanda.
No problem. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.